Hey everyone, I'm Liz and today I'm going to show you how I made these realistically shaped crochet dolls. This tutorial is kind of like my Curvy Doll tutorial, but a bit more advanced. In this part, I'll show you the upper half of the doll's body. And in part 2, I'll show you how to make the arms and the lower half of the body. Some things you'll need for this tutorial are a crochet hook, I'll be using a size E, a pair of scissors, a yarn needle. If you like, you could use a stitch marker or a bobby pin to keep track of the first stitch of your row. You'll need some eyes for your doll. I'll be using these black yarn eyes that I made by tying a thick knot. If you want to see how I made these eyes, click the link on the screen for my yarn eyes tutorial. Or you could use safety eyes or animal eyes if you prefer. You'll also need some fiber fill. And of course you'll need yarn. All the yarns I'm using are Red Heart brand, but you can use any Aran or worsted weight yarn you like in any color you choose. I'm also going to use craft wire to make a wire skeleton for my doll. You can find a link to my craft wire doll skeleton tutorial in the description below, or click the link at the end of the video. You don't need to make a skeleton for your doll, but if you want to make a doll with a neck, I highly recommend that you use something to reinforce the neck so that the head doesn't droop. I won't be adding the skeleton until part 2 of the video, so if you like, you could wait to make the skeleton until then. And if you'd like a written version of this doll, I've made a pattern available on my Ravelry store, which can be found in the description below, or you can click the link on the screen. First, I'm going to create a double magic circle. To make a magic circle, I'm going to wrap my yarn around my fingers twice to create 2 loops. And then into those 2 loops, I'm going to insert my hook and pull up a loop. And I'm going to chain 2. And that's going to count as my first stitch. Now into my loops, I'm going to pull up a loop and single crochet. So now I have 2 stitches. I want to have 6 stitches in total, so I'm going to single crochet 4 more times into my magic circle. Okay, now I'm going to close my magic circle. First I'm going to pull on the tail a little bit, so that I have 1 bigger loop and 1 smaller loop. Then I'm going to take my smaller loop, and I'm going to pull it from the side that's closest to the tail, until the other loop closes completely. And then I'm just going to pull on my tail until this loop closes. Next I need to increase to make the top of the head bigger. I'm going to increase 6 times for every row. Since I have just 6 stitches in this row, I'm going to increase every stitch. So first I'm going to find that chain 2 that counted as the first stitch of the row. And I'm going to insert my hook into that chain. Pull up a loop. And single crochet. And before I continue, I'm going to use my bobby pin to mark that as the first stitch of this row. Now this will count as the back of the work, but the first stitch of the row is going to drift a little over to this side as I work, so I'm going to have to account for that as I go later on. So now I'm going to increase this row, so I'm going to go back into that same stitch that I just worked into for the first stitch. And I'm going to single crochet again into that stitch to increase. And I'm going to do that for every stitch in this row. I'm going to single crochet 2 times into each stitch until the end of the row. Alright, I've gotten to the end of my row and I've removed my stitch marker and done the first stitch of the next row. So I'm going to increase this next row, and once again I'm going to increase 6 times. So in this next row, I'm going to increase every second stitch. So I've done the first stitch, now I'm going to increase the second. So single crochet 2 times into the next stitch. And I'm going to continue to increase every second stitch until I reach the end of this row. And I'm going to do one more row of increase. You can increase your work as much as you like if you want to make a bigger doll. In the next row you would increase every 3rd stitch, in the next you would increase every 4th stitch, then increase every 5th stitch, and so on. Just continue to increase until your work reaches the width you want for the head of your doll. So I've gotten to the end of my row of increasing every 3rd stitch, and I've removed my stitch marker and done the first stitch of my row. Now I'm going to continue to single crochet for 6 more rows to make the head longer. If you want, you could add more or less rows of single crochet depending on the size doll you're making. Just go on until you have the length you want for the face. Now I've gotten to the end of 6 more rows of single crochet, and now I'm going to add the eyes to the front of the face. Since the first stitch of my row is going to continue to drift to the back in this direction, I'm going to place the eyes a little closer to this side than exactly the front middle of the face, so that the first stitch drifts more toward the middle back of the doll. So I'm going to place them about here, just to the side of the first stitch of my row. And once I've figured out where I want the eyes to go, I'm just going to sew them in place using the tails. But again, if you want, you could use safety eyes instead. And you don't have to do this, but once I'm done sewing in the eyes, I'm just going to tie a couple of the tails of each eye together a few times to bring the eyes closer together. This is going to shape the face a little bit. If you're going to do this, you should make sure the eyes are a little further spaced apart when you sew them on. Now I'm going to add a bit of fiber fill to the top of the head. Next I'm going to begin to decrease each row to create the neck. I'm going to do the same thing I did to increase, but in reverse. So I'm going to do 6 decreases per row. When I was increasing at the top of the head, I last increased every 3rd stitch, so now I'm going to decrease every 3rd stitch, but you should decrease by whatever number you last increased by at the top of the head. Depending on how big you make your doll, you may need to decrease for a few rows. Just continue to decrease each row by the next descending number. Like if your first row is decreased every 5th stitch, then the next would be decreased every 4th stitch, then every 3rd stitch, and so on. Then just go on until your doll's neck reaches the desired width. If you want to learn some different ways to decrease, or if you just want more practice with decreasing and increasing, check out my increasing and decreasing tutorial by clicking the link on the screen. So I've removed my stitch marker and done the first stitch of my row. So I'm going to single crochet into the next stitch. And then I'm going to decrease the 3rd stitch, so I'm going to insert my hook through the next 2 stitches. And pull up a loop, and single crochet to decrease. and I'm going to continue to decrease every third stitch all the way around this row. I've reached the end of my first row of decrease. I'm going to decrease for another 2 rows, but before I finish my rows of decrease, I'm going to add a bit more fiber fill to the head so that it'll be easier to get the fill into the hole. And I'm going to make sure not to overstuff the head. And then I'm just going to continue to decrease to slim down the neck even more. In this row, I'm going to decrease every second stitch, and in the next row, I'm going to decrease every stitch. You don't have to decrease your doll's neck this much, it all depends on how big your doll is and how wide you want the neck to be. Now I've gotten to the end of my last row of decreases and I've decreased every stitch of the row. Now I have 6 stitches total again. So now I'm going to add a neck to my doll. This is entirely optional. If you want, you could just go straight into the body of your doll by skipping this step. To create my neck, I'm going to single crochet without any increases or decreases for 3 more rows. You could do more or less rows if you want a longer or shorter neck. It all depends on the look you want. Just go on until you reach the length that you want. Alright, I've completed the neck. Now I need to increase to create the shoulders of my doll. Since I just have 6 stitches in my row, I'm going to just increase every stitch, but in the next row I'm going to change where I'm placing my increases to shape the shoulders. So, if you have more than 6 stitches in your row, you should skip to the next step. So I'm just going to increase every stitch of this row. So I've finished my first row of increasing after the neck. Now to increase the shoulders, I'm going to increase 3 times per side where I want the shoulders to go. I'm going to do this for 2 more rows, but you can go on for as long as you like until the shoulders of your doll are the right width. Alright, I finished doing 3 increases on this side. Now I'm going to single crochet until I get to the other side, and then I'm going to do 3 more increases. Alright, I've finished with 2 rows, increasing the shoulders each 3 times per row. Now I'm going to make the armholes right under where I placed the shoulders. To do that, I'm going to skip all the increases I made on each side in the last row and make a hole right under those stitches. So I'm going to continue to single crochet until I get to the shoulder. Alright, I've gotten to my increases from the previous row. Now I'm going to make a chain and skip all those increased stitches. So I'm going to chain 4, and then I'm going to skip these 6 stitches of my increase and single crochet into the next stitch. If you're making a larger doll, you may want to skip and chain more stitches to make a larger armhole. You can go ahead and do that. Just make sure to chain 2 less stitches than you're skipping. Since I'm skipping just 6 stitches, I just chained 4. Now my first armhole is made. Next I'm going to add some curves to the doll's chest. This is obviously optional. You can just make your doll with a flat chest. If you want to do that, you could just skip this step and continue to single crochet as normal. But for this doll, I'm adding a bust. So to do that, I'm going to increase and then decrease the doll's chest. There are a ton of different ways you could shape the bust of your doll. You could increase 6 times per row for a larger sized bust, or increase 4 times per row for a slightly smaller bust, or for an even smaller bust you could just increase 2 times per row. Or again, don't increase at all to create a flat chest. In this tutorial, I'll increase the front of my doll 6 times per row. So I'm going to add 3 increases to the front of each side of the chest. This is going to be very similar to what I did to make the shoulders, except I'm going to put my increases at the front of the body instead of the sides. Okay, I've done my first 3 increases. Now I'm going to single crochet 1 in between, and then I'm going to do my next 3 increases. Alright, I finished my 6 increases. Now I'm going to create the next armhole, the same way I did the first. I'm going to chain 4, and then skip 6 stitches at the shoulder, and then single crochet into the next stitch. I've done my second armhole. As you can see, the armhole has added these curves to the sides of the doll. In this next row, I'm going to make the sides more straight, so I'm going to increase into the stitch right before the chains of the armholes, and I'm going to skip the first and last chains of the armholes, and that's going to just even out the row. So I'm going to single crochet until I reach the stitch before my chain. Alright, now I'm going to increase into this stitch. So single crochet twice into that stitch. And then skip the next chain and single crochet into these 2 middle chains. And then I'm going to skip the last chain and increase again into the stitch after my chains. Alright, next I'm going to continue to increase the bust. If you want your doll's bust to be really small, you could start to decrease here instead of increase to end your doll's bust, but I'm going to continue to make mine a little bigger, so I'm going to increase 3 times on each side again. So I'm going to single crochet a couple of times, and now here at the front I'm going to do my 3 increases. And then I'm going to single crochet a couple of times in the middle. And then do 3 more increases on this side. Alright, now I'm going to single crochet until I get to the stitch before the next armhole. Where I'm going to do the same thing I did on the other side, I'm going to increase into that stitch. And now, just like on the other side, I'm going to skip the next chain and single crochet into the 2 chains in the middle. Then I'm going to skip the last chain and increase into the next stitch. And then I'm just going to single crochet till the end of the row, which is this stitch here. If you made the armholes bigger, it'll be exactly the same, just increase the stitch before and after the chain, skip the first and last chain, and single crochet into the chains in the middle. So I finished my row. Now in this next row, I'm going to start to decrease the bust. If you want a doll with a larger bust than this, you could just keep adding rows of increase until the bust reaches the size you like. Just make sure to decrease the bust by doing the opposite of what you did to increase the bust. So I'm going to decrease 3 times per side per row for 2 rows, since when I was increasing, I increased 3 times per side for 2 rows. And if you added less than 6 stitches for your doll's bust, then you should decrease by that same number. So I'm going to single crochet until I get to the front of the doll. Alright, I've gotten to the front. So now I'm going to decrease 3 times, so I'm going to thread my hook through the next 2 stitches. Pull up a loop. And decrease. I'm going to do that 2 more times. Alright, now I'm going to single crochet a couple of times in the middle. And then I'm going to do 3 decreases on the opposite side. Alright, I finished my decreases. Now I'm going to single crochet until the end of the row. Okay, I've finished my row. I'm going to do 1 more row to decrease the bust, since I did 2 rows to increase the bust. So I'm just going to single crochet until I get to the front, where I'm going to decrease 3 times per side again. And then I'm going to single crochet until the end of the row. Now I've finished my row decreasing the bust. So at this point I'm going to fold in the middle to create a more realistic cleavage look. If you don't want to do this, you could just add fiber fill to the entire bust area without folding in the middle, but for this doll I'm going to add fiber fill to each side and leave the middle folded in. So I've finished adding my fiber fill to the bust. Now I'm going to decrease to make the waist size smaller. I'm going to decrease 2 times per side, but if you want an even tinier waist, you could decrease 3 times per side, and if you want a little less of a tiny waist, just decrease once per side. If you want your doll to have a larger sized waist, you should just increase 1 to 3 times per side, depending on how large you want your doll's waist to be. Or you could just skip this step and just make the body more flat by adding no increases or decreases. So in this row, I'm going to decrease 2 times per side at the front of the doll, and then I'm going to do 2 rows of normal single crochet. I'm going to repeat this pattern a couple of times to make the doll's body get gradually more narrow. I'm just going to do 2 rows of decrease and 2 rows of normal single crochet. You could continue for as long as you like. Just do your row of increases or decreases, then do 2 normal rows in between, then do another row of increases or decreases, and then 2 more normal rows in between, and so on until your doll's waist reaches the desired size. Alright, I've done a row of decrease, then 2 normal rows, and then another row of decrease. Now I'm going to start to widen the doll's hips. I'm going to do this in pretty much the same way that I did the shoulders. I'm going to increase 2 times per side per row until I get the desired width for my doll's hips. If you want to make your doll's hips even bigger, you could increase 3 times per side, or if you want them smaller, just increase 1 per side. Or if you want them to stay flat, just continue to single crochet as normal. And if you want to narrow the doll's hips, just do decreases instead of increases. I'm going to do 2 rows to increase the doll's hips, but you can go on for as many rows as you like. Okay, I've gotten to the end of my rows of increase, and now I'm just going to pull open this loop, and I'm going to continue with the other half of the body later. And now the upper half of the doll's body is done. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to check out the second part of this tutorial by clicking the link at the end of the video. In the next part, I'll show you how to make the arms and how to finish the other half of the body. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, give it a like or share it on social media. You can also find the written pattern in my Ravelry store. The link is in the description below. If you want to support me in making new videos, consider donating to my Patreon page. It's entirely optional, but if you do, you can get some perks like having access to my videos a week before they're posted here on YouTube. You can find more information about that in the description below. And if you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and I'll see you all next time. Bye!